Good day, everyone. This is another module reading from the subject social psychology. So, what's our topic now is the self in social world. Okay, I'm just going to this, prepare everything. Before I start the module reading. Okay, um, the self in social world. In our perspective, we tend to overestimate our tendency to be easily seen or visible to other people. This is called the spotlight effect, or the belief that we tend to see ourselves at the center stage, thereby overestimating the extent Overestimating the extent of other attention is focused on us. In a study of Gilovich, Medvak, and Savitsky 2000, they explored the spotlight effect by having individual Cornell University students wear embarrassing Barry Manilow t-shirts before entering a room with other students. The self-conscious t-shirt wearers guessed that nearly half of their peers would notice the shirt. Only 23% did. This emphasizes that fewer people notice that we presume. Similar to this, the illusion of transparency. When we believe that we are indeed showing our real emotion, but we are not. If we are happy and we know it, then our face will surely show it. And others, we presume, will notice. But in reality, people may not be necessarily notice it. What is our objectives? Number one, understand self-esteem and its implication for behaviors and cognition. Number two is understand how accurately we know ourselves and what determines our self-concept. Number three is self-presentation and see how impression management can explain the behavior. Self-concept. The most important aspect of yourself is yourself. You know who you are, your gender, whose feeling and memories you experience. The elements of your self-concept, the specific belief by which you define yourself, are your self-schemas. Marcus and Worth, 1987. For example of this belief include our being athletic, overweight, smart, etc. Schemas. Schemas are mental templates by which we organize and by which we organize our worlds. Self-schemas are the most important part of oneself. It indicates who you truly are, and how you make your world in sync with other aspects of your life. The possible self or ideal self, the possible self or ideal self is what we can become in the future of how we imagine ourselves. Developing of the self, development of the self. Self-concept has become a major social psychological focus because it helps organize our thinking and guide our social behavior. In a study about twins, researchers found out researchers, researchers found out that it's not only the genes that influence the personality of the subjects, but as well as their social experiences, which includes the following. Number one, role we play. Portraying the role correctly, others expect us to take over, like being a college student, a good child to our parent, or etc. When we enact our new role, we initially feel self-conscious. However, we would gradually absorb these roles into our self into our sense of oneself. Number two, social comparison. Assessing our capabilities and ability by comparing ourselves to other people. Our lives revolve around social comparisons. We feel handsome when others seems homely, smart when others seems dull, caring when others seems callous. When we witness a peer's performance, we cannot resist implicitly. Again, when we witness a peer performance, we cannot resist implicitly comparing ourselves. Gilbert and others, 1995, Stable and Sauce, 2004. Therefore, we may privately take some pleasure in a peer failure, especially when it happens to someone we envy and when we don't feel vulnerable to such misfortune. Number three, successes and failure. Our daily experiences in life contribute a lot to our self-esteem. To undertake challenging yet realistic tasks and to succeed is to feel more competent. Self-esteem comes not only from telling children how wonderful they are, but also from hard-earned achievements. Number four, people's or other people's judgment. How people regard us as a person affects our self-perception. George Herbert Mead noted that what matters for our self-concept is not how others see us, but the way we imagine they see us. Again, George Herbert Mead noted that what matters for our self-concept is not how others see us, but the way we imagine they see us. Next is self-culture. Two certain cultural variables significantly affect ourselves. The first one is individualism, which is very evident in Western countries. Individualism is being independent. It thrives when a person experiences things like urbanism, affluence, mobility, etc. The second variable is observed in Asia, Africa, Central and South America is what we call collectivism. Being collectivist means using the word we more than I in everything that we do. Again, being a collectivist means using the word we more than I in everything that we do. Despite individual and subcultural variations, researchers continue to regard individualism and collectivism as genuine cultural variables. Growing an individualism. With a growing culture of the me generation and make a name for yourself, people are promoting the sense of building their identity. However, a question like who create this culture is yet to unfold as the interaction between individual and society becomes deeper. Is it the parents or it is just the culture that focuses more? It is the parents. It is it the parents or it's just the culture that focuses more on uniqueness? Culture and cognition. How people perceive something depends on their culture and will show and will show if there are and will show if they are individualist or collectivist. Having to ask about the purpose of language. An American student would say that it is used for self-expression, whereas a Korean student might say that it allows communication between two individuals or more. Inter- Interdependent individuals are more who give more importance to belongingness. They have more than one self, or self with family, self with colleagues, self with siblings, etc. Self concept appears to adjust in situation like if you always talk with the same people over and over again, chances are they will become a big part of your identity compared to individuals who are used to come and go. Culture and self-esteem. Self-esteem is uh, differently viewed when someone is an individualist or collectivist. Self-esteem in collectivist culture correlates closely with what others think of my group and I. Self-concept is malleable, or the context is specific, rather than stable, enduring across situation. In individualism, a person's self-esteem is threatened when you attack them personally than collectivism, which will be threatened if their collective identity will be under siege. This leaves the conclusion that self-esteem is malleable and not stable. Self-knowledge, explaining our behavior. Sometimes, when people are asked about a certain thing, they tend to give plausible answers to causes that are subtle and explanations often wrong. Predicting our behavior. The primary concern in predicting one's behavior is underestimating or overestimating a person's particular task, ability, or skill. Predicting our feelings. Sometimes we know how we feel, or sometimes we know how we will feel if we fail that exam, win that big game, or soothe our tension with a half-hour jog. Studies of affect forecasting. Again, studies of affective forecasting reveal that people have the greatest difficulty predicting the intensity and the duration of their future emotions. In predicting feelings, people usually overreact, leading to misprediction if they base their decision on their effective forecast. Wisdom and illusion of self-analysis. Intuitions are often wrong when it comes to how we feel and what we do. However, then the causes of our behavior are conspicuous and the correct explanation fits our intuition. Our self uh, our self-perception will be accurate. When the causes of the behavior when the causes of behavior are obvious to an observer, they are usually obvious to us as well. Again, when the causes of behavior are obvious to an observer, they are usually obvious to us as well. Self-esteem is a person's overall evaluation of his or herself. It can be affected by things that are important to that person. For example, A person might have high self-esteem because of his or her looks, achievements. Again, for example, a person might have high self-esteem because of his or her looks, achievements, or status. Because of her looks, achievements, or status, the same as the person might also have high self-esteem, but due to different reasons, like a feeling of being loved by God and uplifting to his or her moral values. Self-esteem and motivation. Self-esteem feelings are likely signals it alert. Again, self-esteem and motivation. Self-esteem feelings are self-esteem feelings are the signals. Dapat ganon. Again. Self-esteem feelings are like signals. Self-esteem and motivation. Self-esteem feelings are like signals. It alerts us to threatened social rejection, motivating us to act with greater sensitivity to others' expectation. Abraham Tesser reported that people's perceiving one of you as more capable than the other would motivate the less able one to act in a way that maintained self-esteem. Studies confirm that social rejection lowers our self-esteem and make us more eager for approval. Spurned or jilted, we feel unattractive or inadequate. Like a blinking dashboard light, this pain can motivate action, self-improvement, and search for acceptance and inclusion elsewhere. The dark side of self-esteem. People with low self-esteem often have problems in life. They make less money, abuse drugs, and are more likely to be depressed. However, low self-esteem was not the cause of young adults' problems. It's the idea that people could not escape their tough childhoods. Self-esteem or high self-esteem, on the other hand, foster initiative, resilience, and pleasant feelings. Narcissism. A person with high self-esteem values achievements. Again, narcissism. A person with high esteem values achievements and relationships with others equally, whereas a narcissistic person lacks the latter. A person with narcissism doesn't care about the quality of the relationship he or she produces with another person as long as something can feed his or her ego. Something can feed his or her ego. Narcissists love being winners but aren't as concerned with being emotionally close to others. A narcissistic person can be into a lot of things that can lead to other concerns like gambling, hooking up, materialism, etc. Low versus secure self-esteem. People who have low self-esteem are more vulnerable to different clinical problems, while those with secure self-esteem are conducive to long-term well-being. Self-esteem, in the overall sense of self-worth, we use to appraise our traits and abilities. Our self-concepts are determined by multiple influences, including our roles and the comparison we make, our social identities, how we perceive others appraising us, and other experiences of success and failures. Self-esteem motivation influences our cognitive processes. Facing failures, high self-esteem people sustain their self-worth by perceiving other people as failing too, and by exaggerating their superiority over others. Although high self-esteem is generally more beneficial than low, researchers have found that people high in both self-esteem and narcissism are the most aggressive. Someone with a big ego who is threatened or depleted by social rejection is potentially aggressive. Perceived self-control. Self-control depletes our limited willpower reserves. It can be compared to muscular strength according to Baumeister and Julia Exline, where it needs rest after overusing it. Example, people who exert self-control by suppressing their hunger subsequently quit faster. People who have tried to control their emotional responses to an upsetting movie exhibit decreased physical stamina. People who have spent their willpower on tasks such as controlling their emotion during an upsetting film later become more aggressive and more likely to fight with their partners. Next is self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is the sense that a person is competent and capable. Self-worth, on the other hand, is the individual sense of self-worth. Many people confuse self-efficacy with self-esteem. If you believe you can do something, that's self-efficacy. If you like yourself overall, that's self-esteem. Okay, again, if you like yourself overall, that's self-esteem. When you were a child, your parents may have encouraged you by saying things like, "You're special." It is intended to build self-esteem. Instead of, "I know you can do it," in, intended to build self-efficacy. So if you say you're special, it's building self-esteem. If he or she say, "I know you can do it," it's intended to build self-efficacy. Next is locus of control. Could either be internal, wherein one often feels in charge of their destiny, or external, wherein one is a victim of circumstances. Next is learned helplessness and self-determination. Martin Seligman identified learned helplessness as a learned feelings of being hopeless in any situation. The sense of hopelessness and resignation learned when a human or animal perceive no control over repeated bad events. Depressed or oppressed people, for example, become passive because they believe their efforts do not affect them. Self-determination, in contrast, is bolstered by experience successfully exercising control and improving one's situation. Next is tyranny of freedom. Too much freedom causes decreased life satisfaction. Barry Schwartz posited that too many choices could lead to paralysis. The self-serving bias. Self-serving bias is the tendency to perceive oneself favorably. Many dozens of experiments have found that people accept credit when told they have succeeded. They attribute the success to their ability and effort, but they attribute failure to external factors such as bad luck or the problem's inherent impossibility. This self-serving attribution phenomenon attributing positive outcomes to oneself and negative outcomes to something else or to someone else. So what's this? This self-serving attribution phenomenon is one of the most potent of human biases. When people compare their selves with other individuals, self-serving bias is also present. Compared with people in general, most people see themselves as more ethical, more competent at their job, friendlier, more intelligent, better looking, less prejudiced, healthier, and even more insightful and less biased in their self-assessment. Next is optimism. Predisposes a positive approach to life. Unrealistically optimistic people are more likely to settle with a poor choice. Optimism beats pessimism in promoting self-efficacy, health and well-being. Again, optimism predisposes a positive approach to life. Unrealistically optimistic people are more likely to settle with poor choice. Optimism beats pessimism in promoting self-efficacy, health, and well-being. Being natural optimists, most people believe they will be happier with their lives in the future, a belief that surely helps create happiness in the present. Defensive pessimism can help people in dealing with unrealistic optimism. Defensive pessimism anticipates problems and motivates active coping. There is a power to negative as well as positive thinking. The moral, success in school and beyond requires enough optimism to sustain people and enough pessimism to motivate concern. Again, there is power to negative as well as positive thinking. The moral, success in school and beyond requires enough optimism to sustain hope and enough pessimism to motivate concern. Next is false consensus and uniqueness. The tendency to overestimate the commonality of one's opinion and one's undesirable and unsuccessful behaviors. False consensus effect is finding false consensus cons- false consensus false consensus False consensus effect is finding support for our opinions by overestimating the extent to which others agree. The self-serving bias is a product of how we digest and accept details about ourselves. Comparing ourselves with others require us to take notice, assess, and recall their behavior and ours. Reflection on self-esteem and self-serving bias. The self-serving bias as adaptive. Self-serving bias and its accompanying excuses become adaptive when it helps the persons to deal with the problem and become less prone to depression. The self-serving bias as maladaptive. People who blame others for their social difficulties are often unhappier than people who can acknowledge their mistakes. Self-serving biases also inflate people's judgment of their groups, a phenomenon called group-serving bias. Explaining away out group members' positive behavior also attributing negative behavior to their disposition, while excusing such behavior by one's group. When groups are comparable, most people consider their group superior. That people see themselves, that people see themselves and their group with a favorable bias is hardly new. Next is self-presentation, self-handicapping. Protecting one's self-image with behaviors that create a handy excuse for later failure. If we fail while handicapped in some way, we can cling to a sense of competence. If we succeed under such conditions, it can only boost our self-image. Handicaps protect both self-esteem and public image by allowing us to attribute failures to something temporary or external. I was feeling sick. I was out too I was out too late to I was out too late the night before rather than to lack of talent or ability. Next is impression management. We work at managing the impressions we create. We excuse, justify, or apologize as necessary to shore up our self-esteem and verify our self-images. Self-presentation refers to our desire to present the desired image to an external audience or the other people and to an internal audience ourselves. Self-monitoring is the tendency to who, for example, agree that I tend to be what people expect me to be. So it's the tendency to act like social chameleons. They adjust their behavior in response to external situations. About an external audience, those who score high on the scale of self-monitoring adjust their behavior to each situation, whereas those low in self-monitoring may do so little social adjusting that they seem insensitive. Next is, as a social animals, we adjust our words and action to suit our audiences. To varying degrees, we note our performance and adjust it to create the impression we desire. Such tactics explain examples of false modesty in which people put themselves down, extol future competitors, or publicly credit others while privately crediting themselves. Again, uh, is publicly credit others while privately crediting themselves. Sometimes people will even self-handicap with self-defeating behavior that protect self-esteem by providing excuses for failure. So now we have the glossary, the spotlight effect. This is the belief that others are paying more attention to one's appearance and behavior than they are. Next is the illusion of transparency. The illusion that our concealed emotion leak out and can be easily read by others. Next is self-concept. A person's answer to the question, Who am I? Self-schema. Belief about the self that recognize and guide the processing of self-relevant information. Next is possible selves. Images of what we dream of or dread becoming in the future. Next is social comparison. Evaluating one's ability of an opinion. Again, evaluating one's abilities and opinion by comparing oneself with others. Next is individualism. The concept of giving priority to one's own goals over group goals and defining one's identity in terms of personal attributes rather than group identification. Next is collectivism. Giving priority to the goals of one's group, often one's extended family or work group, and defining one's identity accordingly. Next is self-esteem. A person's overall self-evaluation or sense of self-worth. Self-efficacy, self-efficacy, a sense of competence and effectiveness. Distinguished from self-esteem is one's sense of self-worth. Locus of control. The extent to which people perceive outcomes as internally controllable by their efforts or as externally controlled by the chance or other outside forces. Next is learned helplessness. The sense of hopelessness and resignation learned with a human or animal perceives no control over repeated bad events. Next is false consensus effect. The tendency to overestimate the commonality of one's opinions and one's undesirable of unsuccessful behaviors. Our references is from Mayers G. Social Psychology, 11th edition by McGraw-Hill, Higher Education, and Mayers G. Exploring Social Psychology, 7th edition, McGraw-Hill, Higher Education. That's all for the self in a social world. Nakapaloob yan sa social psychology. Yan lamang po at magandang gabi sa inyong lahat.